You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph, and joining me once again on a Monday, he's back. It's Chris. What's going on, Chris?
I'm good. Missed you last week. Was on the road for work, but hope you're doing well and excited to talk to you, of course, as always.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, last week I couldn't. My cousin was in town as well, so it was mutual that we couldn't do it last week. But tons to talk about this time. We're going to be talking about rookie minicamp, some of the good, the bad that we're hearing from that, and then of course we're going to talk about Steve Wilks because he had his very first press conference with the media this past week. Believe it was Friday. So yeah, we'll talk about that. But first, let's talk about this rookie minicamp, right? The future of the 49ers got onto the field Friday, and we got some reports out of that, and we're hearing some good, we're hearing some bad. Now, I sourced the good and the bad from Grant Cohn. I mean, he always does the good and not so good reports out of any practice. And I know a lot of people, maybe don't jive with Grant Cohn, but that's okay. We'll kind of try to rationalize some of what he put there. We're not in the building, right? So it's like we gotta listen to our eyes on the inside. And so Grant's one of those guys. Matt Barrows also had some reports that we'll share for you guys. And so let's talk about it. In the good column, Grant had Jair Brown. No surprise there. I mean, I believe he said Brown looked like a 3-year vet already, as far as his body, just how he kind of carries himself. All very good things. Yeah, built like a 3rd-year pro is what he said about him. And he said the same thing about Darrell Luter as well, who also made the good list. Braden Willis also made the list. Ronnie Bell. And Ronnie Bell was one that Matt Barrows also noted that, he made a lot of catches. The one thing Grant said about Ronnie Bell is his size. He's smaller. He looks like a college player. But it's hard to argue with the production, right? So he was able to, make some impressive catches in practice, and definitely seems to be, kind of a he puts his body on the line kind of receiver. I mean, I joked that, if you do a scouting report on Ronnie Bell just based off of pictures like Google Images, you can come away with that much, that he'll lay out for catches. He'll do some crazy acrobatic things, good hand-eye coordination. So no surprise that he made the good list. Jalen Graham was another one. And Matt Barrows also pointed him out as someone who was tall, long-limbed, almost looks like a defensive end, he said. And then he also pointed out Kalan LeBourne, who is one of the undrafted free agent running backs. And I've heard his name on and off. I know a lot of people were excited about that signing. Undrafted free agent, so of course, not someone you're going to hear too much, but from fans who, I assume they've watched him, at some capacity. A lot of guys have said good things about him. So, and the other guy is Isaiah Winstead. Ilm Mannings also made the good list. But the guy that's making the rounds today on Twitter is Ja'Cour Pearson. And you've seen the video, right?
Yeah.
Right, Chris? Yeah, at this point, I think most of us have seen the video. I'll play it for you guys now. This guy looks quick, fast. So let's share here what we got. One of my many tabs. We'll play it. He's fast. So he's this guy right here. And the video will replay. So don't worry. But yeah, he's got some burners on him. Former XFL wide receiver. So there he is. He just right off the bat beats his man. Yeah, that's pretty it's pretty impressive. 49ers, they're not going to be the only one interested in Jakor, I would assume, because he was also invited to the Colts mini camp and then also the Falcons, if I'm not mistaken. So if he was doing that at their practice as well, I think there might be some competition for his services.
Yeah, so I was excited. I didn't realize that he had gotten that invite for the mini camp until actually I started hearing about after the fact, because once they solidified the invitee list, I didn't notice his name. I did watch some XFL games this year, just because they were on. I didn't like necessarily go out of my way, but he did definitely stand out, right, in the XFL. Certainly different league, but sure, it was still impressive. Led the league in receptions and receiving, if I'm not mistaken. Speed definitely jumps out. He'll probably be one of those players that you got to kind of do some roster jockeying potentially if he still has a good OTAs and training camp, because he'd be one of those people that definitely get grabbed up somewhere else, if even off of a practice squad, right? So it'll be interesting for us to keep our eyes on him. I was excited to hear about the the practice that Braden Williams has had for the couple of days of on rookie minicamp as well. I don't know, like I'm excited to see how he develops and what comes of him this summer. Even though he was the second tight end that the Niners took, round 7 after Latu was taken first. I have more excitement around him than I do Latu. No knock on him. I just think that, Braden Willis has been playing the position longer. I believe that he's also probably more of a familiar with the position, obviously, of tight end. And it sounds like he's pretty good at, getting off of man coverage and so on. So, and extending his, catch radius. So I'm really excited to hear about that. Obviously, the returns on Tig Brown, hearing those comments and such are exciting. Whether it's something that an opportunity for him to get into the lineup, in this year, or is a target for the future, to have a bigger role in the defense. He may be brought along similarly to how Talanoa Hufanga was, splitting time with Jaquiski Tart in Jaquiski Tart's last year, Hufanga's first year. He's a strong safety, right, Brown? Is he strong? Because he would be – okay, so he would be. I believe so. Okay, so then he would be.
He would be what Sean Gibson is right now.
Sean Gibson, yeah, he'll be splitting time with Sean Gibson, yeah. So yeah, that'd be good to see. I also I made note in my notes about the contested catches with Ronnie Bell, because I remember you talking about that. I remember you talking about. I kind of heard kind of both things, right? That he's great at contested catches, but I also heard he's kind of one of those players that may make a catch look to be more challenging than it is, if that makes sense, right? Because how like you have some receivers, for instance, who I remember hearing coaches talk about actually in the NFL and in college about players who sometimes like leave their feet when they don't have to. He sounds like maybe one of those players that kind of does that. But that could be a comfort thing, right? Do what you got to do to catch the ball. I don't care. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, so I did make note of that, because I remember you mentioning that. You're actually one of the first people that I heard say that. I'm excited about Darrell Luter too, about how he continues to look over the summer too, because I'm not a big fan of player comps, but I will say I get like Emmanuel Mosley vibes from him in respect to how he's built and the game film that I've seen of him so far. So yeah, sounds like rookie minicamp was definitely positive for the most part. Certainly there's going to be some opportunities for improvement and opportunities for players to continue to work on their bodies and such. Sounds like maybe D Winters came in a little out of shape a little bit, but he's got some months to work on that stuff. I think an off the field positive, albeit maybe a small one, from rookie minicamp was when those guys hit the field, the entire class was signed. I mean, all the rookies were signed, all the undrafted free agents were signed, and that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to just get that out of the way, and not have any of those contracts kind of hanging around or lingering. Lord knows in the past we've had some of those circumstances could be because we didn't have our first or second round draft pick. Maybe that's where some of those contracts get kind of like, contentious. But still, regardless of the circumstances, it's great that all those guys were, had put pen to paper before they went out there on the field, and they could just practice on, getting better.
Yeah, I know someone like pointed out that it could have been the new CBA, that now like the rookie contracts are way more simple. Really, all they have to hash out are the guarantees, because that's really like the only difference. So that could be a good thing for teams, and seemed to benefit the 49ers, certainly, that they were able to get all of their contracts done here, fairly early. But yeah, let's talk about the not so good of rookie mini camp. And, I think we should take these all with a grain of salt, and, look at the context as well, not just look at, okay, they're under the not so good. Just think about why. And it's still early. It's May. So there's some times to correct some of these things, right? So Cameron Latu, Grant Cohn put him under the not so good, right? Matt Barrows and Grant did point this out. He does have the size of a veteran. So size is on his side. That's good. But one thing Grant noted was he doesn't move with finesse and will need to improve his concentration in traffic. The moving with finesse thing, that was one thing that like I noticed when I watched a little bit of him, after the 49ers drafted him. He looks like someone who's still learning the tight end position, right? And all that comes with that. So he can learn that. He's got someone great to learn under, like George Kittle, who I know at this point is comfortable being a bit of a teacher on this team. And so Latu will probably take some time. I kind of see him more as a project, than anything, but 49ers obviously, banking on him developing into that guy, and they feel good about that. So not surprising to hear that early. And D Winters, you pointed out, right? He came in a little out of shape. Sometimes, that happens better now than, at training camp, right? Because training camp, It's like, we're ready to go. We're going to start making some decisions here, So it's okay that he's maybe a little out of shape. He has time to get his body right before the real football starts. Joey Fisher couldn't finish practice. That was one I was a little surprised about. He was an undrafted free agent that a lot of people were excited that the 49ers got. I still am. But, as noted by a couple people who were there, he was the only player who couldn't make it through the entire practice. He removed himself from a drill and, spent some time cooling down. Santa Clara isn't that hot. It's, it's not like it's a dry heat or anything like that. It's, so hopefully, he gets acclimated, not just to the weather, but maybe just the conditioning level of the NFL. But altogether, I'm not overreacting over these not so good, designations in rookie minicamp.
Yeah, and an additional aspect of note, looks like Joey Fisher is the only undrafted free agent that had guaranteed money. So it appears to me that the Niners, obviously are, have a good feeling about him as well. So yeah, hopefully he's able to shake that off. Certainly in these, from draft prep to, what's it called? Pro day prep, and also, the combine and so on and so forth. It may have been some time before he's been out there on the field. It's definitely something to notice. I guess you can say it's something definitely I'm sure that he would have not had happen on his first practice with the squad. But that being said, yeah, hopefully that's something that you can just kind of move beyond. But yeah, looks like he's the only guy that had some guaranteed money on the contract that he signed as an undrafted free agent. So we'll see how it goes with him moving forward.
Obviously, if like from the team perspective, right, giving someone an undrafted free agent a guarantee tells you, one, like you probably have multiple offers from other teams. Let's sweeten the deal a little bit, come to the 49ers. And two, it could also mean that they more than likely think he will make the 53, right?
Right.
Or at the very least, the practice squad. So yeah, could mean either one of those two things, but I'm or even both. I'm just assuming that if all goes well in training camp, and if the conditioning thing, if the heat exhaustion doesn't show itself too largely in training camp, I would expect that he will be on this team. Now, a couple of other things of note that Matt Barrows pointed out was how the linebackers were lining up, right? Because we talked about the 49ers, they brought in a lot of linebackers, 2 via the draft, and I think 1 or 2 via undrafted free agency. So Mariano Sori Marin, he lined up as the middle linebacker. D. Winters was the weak side linebacker, or Dre Greenlaw's role, and Jalen Graham was the strong side linebacker, which is Oren Burks' spot to lose, right? As of right now, we're looking at Oren Burks as a guy, former Aziz Al-Shair role there. So yeah, that's how they lined up. Sori Marin, middle linebacker, the Fred Warner role, D. Winters, Dre Greenlaw role, and then Jalen Graham, the strong side linebacker, Aziz role. So that's about how I would have expected that going. I mean, not to say that, a guy like D. Winters can't also be lined up in strong side for the Aziz spot, right? I'm sure all those guys will probably be competing in some capacity for that role. Once training camp comes around, I would assume.
No, I would agree too. And it's exciting to see, that's the heartbeat of our defense, obviously, is, our linebacking core. I think certainly, the defensive line, I think it's the excitement, and, their reputation precedes them. But, with Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner, I mean, I think that, those are the, the quarterbacks of the defense. So I believe that, stepping into a room like that is probably somewhat intimidating, but then also there's a lot of expectation to come out of there as well. So I think that's one of the position groups that the Niners do a really good job of drafting for. At least in this, this Shanahan and Lynch era, even previously. But at any rate, I think that a lot's to be expected really from that group. So I'm excited to see how they look moving forward into this summer as well, and just hope everyone stays healthy there, because I think that they're a key aspect to how the defense works, and the way that our linebackers, go, cover sideline to sideline and up the seam and such, I think is different than any other team in the league.
Yeah, I agree. Now, let's talk about kickers. So Jake Moody, we got to say Jake Moody, kick some footballs down the uprights for this time. This video from David Lombardi, and I'll share it. The practice. So, I mean, it is good to see, right? We want to see that he's transitioning well into the NFL, and yes, it's just rookie minicamp, but this is a good sign. This is a good first start for Jake Moody, being able to see those balls go through the uprights. So, I think for us as well, I think we need a lot of validation that this pick was the right one, in the 3rd round, right? Because I know a lot of us weren't too happy about it. A lot of us, on the other hand, are really happy with this pick. But I think it's always great to see it in action.
I agree. And probably for the first time in a long time, if ever, from the 49ers perspective, we're going to start hearing a lot about, definitely throughout the preseason. And I'm sure, during training camp, we'll hear reports on how he's looking more than you probably would in other kicker situations outside of like injury or something like that. But I mean, it sounds, I don't know, this might sound like nerdy or whatever the case, but I am looking forward to seeing his kickoffs. I'm not a fan of getting, giving the return team something to bring back. So put the ball through the end zone, make it easy on your return team, set your defense up nicely. That's the kind of stuff that I'm really looking for out of him, not to mention the fact of making kicks, obviously. But, that's some of the stuff from a preliminary standpoint comes preseason I will be checking out on special teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that's the one plus on Moody over Gold potentially, right? Is that he could give you that kickoff ability, and he was damn good at it in Michigan. So that could definitely be a boost for this special teams. Now, friend of the pod, Jordan Elliott, writer for Niners Nation, he wrote about the fact he interviewed Jay Feely, and he asked him about Jake Moody, and I'll just share a little bit of it here. This is on Niners Nation, by the way, so make sure you guys check that out. This dropped today. Great interview. I just wanted to point out some of the key things for me that stood out from this. Jay Feely said, "I think kicking is the hardest position for teams to evaluate." I mean, he pretty much said that teams don't always have a guy in the building to evaluate kickers that know anything about kickers or how to evaluate them, And I feel like the 49ers have a great guy in Brian Schneider, because anytime that you hear about the 49ers picking Jake Moody, like why they did it, Brian Schneider, the 49ers special teams coach, he pretty much vouched for him, and he had him in a private workout, and, based on how all of that went, Schneider banged the table for Jake Moody, right? So I feel confident that the 49ers do have a guy who can evaluate the position. So that's a plus, right? The one really big argument all the time about not drafting kickers early, I think, is like Roberto Aguayo, right? That Tampa Bay took not too long ago. And Jay Feely pointed that out. When I look at guys like Aguayo is a perfect example. Tampa Bay moves up to take him. I was very critical of that pick because I didn't like his form. I didn't like some of the things he did, and I didn't think they would translate well into success, and they ended up not. So Jay Feely, a guy who knows a thing or two about, kicking, right, wasn't a fan of that pick. So it's not always, the best kicker in the draft is always going to be the top guy in the NFL, because some of those things don't translate. Jay Feely saw that. We would hope that a guy like Brian Schneider could see some of those same things. What does translate well, right? And so Feely pointed out, I look at Jake, he has excellent form. It's repeatable form. He's been in high pressure situations throughout his career at Michigan. I think that's another big thing that the 49ers really liked about Moody. He's been through tight games, tough games, game winners, bad weather, good weather, all of it. And so I think that all plays into it. And so it sounds like, Jay Feely has a lot of belief in Jake Moody. And I'm not going to go through the whole, article here, but guys, check it out. I mean, it was actually pretty insightful from Jay Feely and Jordan, who had the chance of interviewing him. I thought it was a really, really good piece.
There was a podcast that I listened to sometime last season during the football season, or that covered Roberto Aguayo and what didn't go well for him. And actually, he was on the pod, like he's interviewed. It wasn't just an analysis and such. And it speaks to the challenges that he had transitioning from college to the NFL. It's really, really good. I was trying to find the name of it, but I couldn't find it. Maybe I'll share it later or whatever the case. But his circumstance seemed a little bit to be an isolated incident. It really wasn't a matter of pressure and so on and so forth. He just had a difficult time adjusting, which could be the case for any NFL player, right? So I agree. I mean, unfortunately, because of his experience, his circumstance, people will say, "Oh man, don't forget Roberto Aguayo was the most highly touted kicker coming out of college, and he didn't work out." But I think when you peel back the onion a little bit, there was more than just what was happening on the field. Not to try to rationalize, getting Jake Moody in the third round, but that's just that's just a reality situation. Yeah. I know that they were saying at Michigan that I think they said there's three things you can rely upon, like death taxes and Jake Moody. So they have a lot of praise for him there as well. I'm really excited about the fact that he has played in high pressure games, made big kicks, played in bad weather, just like you said. So, yeah, I think that time will tell. I think that certainly. I have a question for you. Do you feel, and this is obviously just your opinion, but I'm wondering how much pressure is on him, right? Because certainly he's hearing all this about, oh, I was picked in the third round, and they're, the Niners in the press conference afterwards, Shanahan saying if it was another team, I would have been laughing at them, and we did it ourselves, and those kind of things. Like I'm wondering how much that how much pressure or unease that may put on him as a kicker. I don't know. I guess time will tell. We'll see. But have you heard any of that stuff, or what do you think about potential of him having some pressure as a result of his draft pick, and then also kind of like the statements that were made afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is definitely going to be some pressure for him. I think it's important for him to have the right attitude towards pressure, right? And I think in his career, at least in college, like he has proven to have that. And then Jay Feely also pointed out that a lot of it is the mindset of the kicker. Like that is something you also evaluate, because can he miss a kick and can he go back out the next time and do it again, not miss the kick, but can he go out there and make the kick the next time, right? Or will he let that affect him the next time? Like that, those are all things that you look into. And I think Feely was just saying, like, Moody's been a guy who has had struggles, like, and he pointed out when he did have to compete with Norden, I forget the guy's first name, but another kicker in Michigan in one of his early years there. And that's when he kind of struggled, but he was able to like overcome that. Right. So it's about, if you're going to miss a kick, you have to go out and make the kick the next time. Don't let it get you down. So, we won't know. We won't know until like he actually goes out there and has to start kicking for this team in real pressure situations in a real game, so
yeah,
we won't know for a few years. Probably.
Yeah, and I know I'm probably going a little long talking about kickers, but one thing I will say is this: like, I'm also curious as to, from the coaching staff standpoint and emotional intelligence standpoint, right? Certainly, he had that kicker competition that he was in Michigan, and obviously excelled, got the role, got the job, and was the guy. I almost kind of wonder which will do better for him, and that's for them to determine, for them to be, anointed as being the guy and get Zane Gonzalez out of there and allow him to know that, hey, listen, you're allowed to make mistakes in practice, but you need to work on your craft, so on and so forth. Or if it behooves him to more so have that competition factor there and have Zane Gonzalez be there until maybe say like final cuts or something. So from an emotional intelligence standpoint, the team will just have to do that. They'll have to figure that out. Players have different personalities and traits and what, works well for them and doesn't. But yeah, he's gonna need to succeed, though. I mean, certainly, I think it's interesting. This is somewhat of a transition, I guess you can say, Steph. Still kicker related, but I think it's interesting that there's conversation in regard to. I think Matt Mayoko said something like it may cause Kyle Shanahan to be more aggressive offensively as it relates to getting to the red zone, or when you're in kicking range or whatever the case, as going for it on fourth down as opposed to just settling for the field goal. I thought that was kind of counterintuitive and kind of interesting, right?
Because me too. I was like, why would you draft a kicker in the third round to not trust him?
Right. And so but it's so weird, right? Trying to decipher things, and I know that's the season that we're in, but that was kind of strange, and and especially with Mayoko's proximity to the team and stuff, a lot of times people believe that he kind of like is kind of giving insight into what the team really thinks and what they how they feel. But at any rate, yeah, thinking that I was concerned the complete opposite, right? I was concerned that there would be a lot of confidence in Jake Moody. Granted, there should be drafting him that high, and that would give cover to Shanahan to just rely on kicking the ball as opposed to maybe going for it and be more aggressive on fourth down. So yeah, so it'll regardless of what anyone says, or we'll just see it all play out on the field and see what happens. But yeah, so I'm actually very interested to see what's up with this, though. As strange as that may sound.
No, really. I mean, I think this is going to be one of the more interesting storylines like throughout this season, like just how Jake Moody does, at least for 49er fans. We're all like, really waiting to see what he's going to look like when it's all said and done. But let's talk about Steve Wilks, because on Friday he also spoke with the 49ers media. Surprisingly enough, this was his first presser as the new defensive coordinator of the team. And so we got a lot of, like, I think, great answers from him, and just got some good insight on what he plans to bring to this defense. And also, what players are kind of catching his eye, right? One thing that I know some people, kind of held on to, one of the words he said, he'll be making calls from the booth, not from the field, which of course is different from the last few years that we've seen with Robert Saleh and D'Amico Ryans, both very like animated guys on the field. They get their guys pumped. And so Steve Wilks, he's going to be in the booth upstairs. We won't get those like on field, reactions, but some people are like, well, why not? That sucks. That's not good. I think it's fine. I like it too. Steve Wilks, he comes from the secondary background. When you see things from up above, and this is why all 22 exists too, right? Like when you see things from up above, there's more that you can see, especially when it comes to the secondary, I think, because you could see the spacing better. You could see the timing of everything a little bit better. And if he's going to be making calls, based on some of the things that he's seen, he's going to have to be able to see those things well, right? So I'm totally okay with this. Yeah, I am going to miss some of the, pumped up antics on the field from Saleh and D'Amico, right? But two completely different styles of coaching, I think, as far as like demeanor goes and whatnot. But I think Steve Wilks brings a lot to the table. Johnny Holland, the current linebacker coach, I think will probably be his eyes on the field. So they'll still have someone there. But what'd you think about this, Chris? Like, did it bother you at all to know that he wasn't going to be on the field?
Not me in particular. I think he's from the old school. And I think a little bit, I may have that old school mindset as well. Now, not to take anything away from coaches like Robert Saleh or D'Amico Ryans or other coaches that are either offensive or defensive minded that like to be at field level. I agree with you. I think that you do get a feel for, from a defensive and even offensive standpoint, whatever, what's happening better with that bird's eye view. And again, I realize that, for instance, like, you have offensive assistants or defensive assistants that are in the booth that can relay down what they're seeing or whatever, but in real time, he's going to see it. Right. So I like it better, honestly. I'm more kind of familiar with, OCs and DCs being up in the booth and having that, he does say he says he gets animated though. So there may be clips to the press box where he's maybe up there doing some stuff or getting excited or getting pissed off. I'll be excited to see that because I like emotion from the coaches and stuff. Or maybe he's on the phone like chewing someone out or something. That'd be cool. But not too much, obviously. But no, I'm not bothered by it. I got a good vibe and good feel for Steve Wilks. Always known of him as an assistant coach and obviously the interim at Carolina at the end of last year. I have a great appreciation for his journey and learning more about him and how he's come up from, small community college ranks all the way up through. He was talking about, he's like, I always dreamed to do more, but I never, thought it would, become a realization for a host of different reasons. But really, I just like his mindset about just putting your head down and going to work, right? When he talked about the disappointment that he possessed from not being, kept on over at Carolina, essentially just, saying, hey, I have my faith, and I believe that I have the skills necessary to be a head coach. Obviously, it wasn't a good time, but as soon as the Niner opportunity came, available, he said, this is what I want to do. This is where it's at. So I think it's definitely a blessing for us. And I suspect it will be for him because I think he's going to have success in Santa Clara and San Francisco. Hopefully he doesn't leave us too soon. Hopefully we get a couple of years out of him, but I think he's going to do well. I like to speak a little bit to some of the things that he talked about. That's cool, Steph. Yeah. So I really like, his straightforwardness, right? So, he point blank said, when he reviewed tape on Drake Jackson that, he found Drake Jackson to be inconsistent, right? and again, everyone has their different style, but I think maybe previous coaches may have maybe said that a little bit differently. Oh, there's some place you would want to get back or opportunities to grow, or whatever. He just straight up said inconsistency. You know what I mean? I like that.
Kept
You
it
know what I'm
real. He
saying?
kept it real.
Yeah, kept it real. Exactly. No, I like that. I love that. And still spoke about the potential that Drake Jackson has, still has, spoke about the confidence that he has in him, but he didn't mince any words. Like, and that's what I want to hear from a coach. The coach speak, I can't stand that stuff. I'm excited about, he essentially said that Isaiah Oliver is here to be the nickel, which I think is cool.
Mm-hmm.
That he looks forward to deploying different blitz packages for him and such. He also mentioned, though, like, he spoke to, basically, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So I think, something that was mentioned, from when Chris Kocurek was part of Steve Wilks' interview, and some of the things that the other players had said is that they kind of wanted to maintain, and Shanahan said this too, they kind of wanted to maintain what has made them successful, which I think the offense is going to look similar in that regard, but I get the impression that there may be some creative coverage looks though, right? Because he spoke about deploying man here or zone there or a combination of both. And the secondary is kind of his sweet spot. That's his background. I'm really excited in that regard to really see the intersection between the skill sets that he identifies within the secondary players and even the linebackers for that matter as well. And the scheme. I'm really interested to see, how he gets the most out of those guys on the back end. Because Kocurek, those guys are locked down, right? He's got those guys, being successful, on the front. So that I'm really excited to see how this defense is going to look.
Yeah, me too. I think, overall, it'll probably be more of the same, but with some new wrinkles. And I think some of these new wrinkles are going to be things we haven't really seen before from this defense, like more aggressiveness. He talks about, blitzing, right? And I think Jair Brown could find himself, blitzing as early as this year, right? That they could find a role with him there. Maybe even like Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, we see more blitzes from them. Talanoa Hufanga, right? So they have the pieces. I think they're just going to be a little bit more creative with them. And Tony's question here with Wilks, can we expect to see the defense make more picks? I absolutely think so. And I think part of that reason is because if you look at some of the guys they've brought in, like through the draft, for example, Jair Brown, Darrell Luter, both of those guys, I think, are known for being, pretty aggressive in their approach as defenders. And Jair Brown, he's a ball hawk. So I think that's definitely something that's going to be, kind of, there's going to be a greater emphasis on that. And honestly, I think D'Amico Ryans did a great job with that last season. And he did kind of implement that into training camp and in the practices, just making those guys, I guess, more ball savvy. But I think that's something with the secondary background that Steve Wilks has. I think that's something that, we're going to see more of, and probably maybe more disguising of coverages, things like that. I do have the clip of him talking about the different coverages. That question came from Grant Cohn, and Steve Wilks just answered it to perfection. So I'm going to play it right here.
Played zone coverage at a very high level for a while. Talking to Darrell Luter Jr. yesterday, the rookie, he said he played mostly press man coverage in college. Is that an element you'd like to incorporate in this defense a little bit more?
I think you have to explore and experiment with everything. My background is diverse in zone as well as man. And I think it can change each week based off your opponent and who you're playing. Do I feel like we have the skill set to play more man? Yes. At times, do I want to be a little bit more aggressive with the talent and athleticism that we have at linebacker? Yes.
Yeah.
Just straightforward,
but
you know what I mean? Just I love it.
Yeah, and I liked what he said about, I think it could change based on who we're playing. It could change week to week. And I like that, especially because I think you do have to have that adaptability in the NFL and based on who you're playing, because you're going to get different looks from different teams, right? As far as what they're implementing on offense. And so you need to kind of change some things around based on that. So I love the approach. And it means that it'll make it harder for offenses to prepare against the 49ers, because you're not just expecting one thing. It's not just going to be like, oh, like they do this every week. This is what we're going to see. You know, they're kind of going to have to, you know, not guess, but there'll be more, I think, diverse coverages and all that. So
For
teams
sure.
are going to have to prepare for that. So that's something I'm really excited about, to see the secondary. Like finally, I guess, like, you know, Saleh, D'Amico, great coaches, but not secondary focused. And I think that was kind of evident, right, in their time here. So I'm excited to see the secondary, I think, like, you know, make a leap.
I agree. And even beyond that, everything you just said there, in addition to answering Tony's question, I think that interceptions will, either improve or stay at least where they were, which they were good last year. But I think they have there's an opportunity to, getting even more balls. Because the pass rush is going to be better. I think the pass rush is going to be better. Eric Armstead was out a large part of last year because of injury. Javon Hargrave, of course, we brought him over. Jake Jackson, I think, is going to be a more impactful aspect. We got some, Chris Kosaric has his reclamation projects that are, bound to break out, because that's what they do. He gets people from other squads, ends and D linemen, and, makes them more impactful in the Niner defense. So, and I don't know. I just have a feeling. I think we may still grab someone that's still lingering out there later on as training camp is going along, and get them on a cheap deal. There's some edge rushers that are still lingering. I know Zadarius Smith is gone, but we can talk about that later. I'm over it. But at any rate, I was kind of gunning for Zadarius Smith. I know people have mixed feelings, but I would have loved him in San Francisco. At any rate, I think the pass rush is going to be better. So obviously that will, help the defense on the back end as well, to be able to get those tips and overthrows and, that coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's right now, I think it's somewhat of a bold statement to say that the pass rush will be better, but I like it because, like, I think a lot of people just look at how many guys the 49ers lost in free agency and assume, like, oh, like they haven't done enough to, recoup some of those guys or like replace some of those guys. But, if what they're saying about Steve Wilks, if what Steve Wilks is saying about Drake Jackson, if that's true, and some of the things he said, yes, he was inconsistent much of last season, but he also had some good things to say about Drake Jackson. He said he saw a lot of talent, a lot of skill set, someone that needs to really get a little strong, get a little bigger. But he's noted that Drake Jackson has been there all spring, working out, doing the things that he needs to do to improve his game. And he has gained a lot of weight. So it's obviously the team is banking and expecting on Drake Jackson to take that sophomore leap. And I think he could do it. I mean, especially under another year under Chris Kosaric. I don't think it was, yes, it was a lot of conditioning things, but the talent is there. And we know what Chris Kosaric can do when he has talent. Drake, he's just 22 years old. He, in last season, he played at 273 pounds. So if he's putting on more weight, let's just see what he can do. Right. I think, if he becomes a bigger piece of the pass rush, I think they very well could be better this season. But a lot to look forward to with this defense, as always. I mean, we're very fortunate to have a team with a really good defense, and they lose guys, they lose coaches, and still, we can have this excitement about this unit. So I'm really excited to see what the year brings. Keith says Steph Bosa will be getting paid soon. Yeah, hopefully. It's funny because, like, you would think there'd be so much more talk about this one, but it's kind of like the Fred Warner signing, kind of like the Kittle one, where, like, it's very low key, very, hearing a lot of reports about it, which is a good thing. I think it's a good thing. They don't need the distraction, right? So hopefully, sometime before training camp would be ideal to get a deal done. But anytime around that range, I would expect. Chris, we didn't get to talk about the schedule last week. I gave my prediction last episode. I said at least 10 wins is what I gave this team. Have you thought about your prediction for this season.
I like that. I do like where you're at with that. Yeah, I saw that. And I like how you did it. So this is a 12-win team. This is a 12-win team.
Okay.
Right. And it's like, that's how I feel about the team as constructed. And I honestly, like, we can go down a rabbit hole. We don't have time for that. But even with the quarterback circumstance, right, this is a 12-win squad, right? Mm-hmm. And I have feelings in my heart as to how I think it's going to play out, but we'll see how that goes. And with our coaching, just our culture, how this team, has had success. And I believe that this team can win. I would say the floor is 10. I'm not saying necessarily the ceiling. You can do anything. I'm not saying necessarily the season is 12. I mean, the ceiling is 12, but I think 12 is that sweet spot in my opinion. But my challenge, right? My challenge with saying that is, and I'm sure every fan base can say this, but we drop games that we have no business losing, and that's what the difference. That's what makes you that 10-win team instead of that 12-win team, right? That's why going wins and losses game by game and stuff is kind of somewhat of a challenge for me. And honestly, I would kind of like to look at. I need to dive into what the schedules look like prior to some of these teams playing us. Like you just tweeted earlier, like an insane stretch of 4 weeks that, for instance, the Eagles have, right? I'm not sure what part of the year that was in, but you tweeted that earlier. So that kind of would help me give indication as to how really kind of like how these matchups would bode for one team or the other. I will say that I was excited to see an early Thursday night game to get that out of the way. Then I was like, damn, we got a second Thursday night game later in the season. So I was not excited about that. There's pros and cons with that, right? You're on a short week, but then those players they consider that kind of like a mini bye, if you will, afterward. I was really worried about with having so many East Coast games, how those would be grouped. If they'd be a lot of like back-to-backs on the East Coast and such. So we don't really have too many of those, but so I'm thinking 12. I think 12 is that sweet spot. If it's going to be some competitive games for sure. The schedule is not going to be easy, but I think we're going to have a good indication. No one will be able to say that the Niners haven't played anybody next year. That's going to be impossible. I mean, with the way that the schedule is constructed. So and I'm about it. Let them get battle tested. Let them see some good quarterbacks. Even from the AFC, let them see some good people and show them what the deal is. We just gotta figure out this quarterback situation. So
yeah, that may take all off season, hopefully not all season, but off season for sure. But Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you guys in the comments, you guys watching, for tuning in, staying with us here. Make sure you like this video if you haven't yet. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't yet, because we got more content like this to come. Chris joins me every Monday. I'm going to have shows throughout the week once, the season gets going and all that, once things start ramping up. So appreciate it, guys. Have a good rest of your Monday and your week. Peace.